What's up, everybody? Mr. Forrest back with Hidden Treasures Part 2. Guys, without further delay, let's jump right into the story. You guys will remember last time we introduced a character named Lenny. Lenny was short for his age, so people made fun of him. At school, most people ignored him and some people picked on him, but he was mostly invisible. Remember, Lenny wasn't very handsome, or he wasn't very good in school, or he wasn't very good at sports. Remember, he got a letter from Nick Foles and he loved it so much. He selfie, took pictures of it. And you guys will remember that he was so excited he texted those pictures to his cousins and he read it 11 times and he framed it up on the wall. Remember that Ed also got a letter that same day, but it wasn't from Super Bowl hero Nick Foles. It was from the FBI. You guys will remember that the bank robbers had gotten out of prison and the FBI suspected that they'd be headed back to Ishmael Island to look for the treasure, and they needed Ed's help because Ed knew the island better than anyone else. Remember, he was accompanied by 2 FBI agents, Agent McDaniels and Agent Biggins, whom Ed called Agent Big Chins. You guys will remember he hopped on a couple planes and Agent Biggins never said anything. He just went like this. You'll remember they got on a sailboat and they headed out for Ishmael Island, and Ed discovered that Lenny had stowed away on the ship. You'll remember that Ed and Lenny had a good talk about the Bible. Now, Lenny assumed that if it was the word of God, God would have dangled it down from the sky on a fishing line. But Ed said, that's not how it works, Lenny. God gave us the Bible. Yes, people wrote it, but God guided the human writers. Remember, our epic questions from yesterday was, what is the Bible? The answer, God revealing himself and his plan to his people. The next day epic question was, how did we get the Bible? And the answer was, God guided human authors. Today, our epic question is, how does the Bible help us? I'm going to teach you. The Bible's like a light that shows us how to be saved and how we should live. Practice that with me. The Bible is like a light that shows us how to be saved and how to live. Remember, they had this talk and they were talking about it. And when the talk was over, they heard fighting, they heard a splash, and they heard a gunshot. And they looked and they saw Agent McDaniels fighting with somebody. They wondered, what was the splash? What was the gunshot? Who's he fighting with? Guys, it's time for Hidden Treasures Part 2. They saw the men fighting and they were trying to figure out who the other guy was, and the boys were confused and they noticed that it was Agent McDaniels fighting against Agent Biggins. Agent Biggins? Why are those 2 men fighting? They're both good guys. Unless one of them is a bad guy. If so, which one's the bad guy? Which one's the good guy? Who should we be cheering for? Unless they're both bad guys. The boys were so confused, and then 2 men came up from the cabin, and it startled the boys. Where did these guys come from? The 2 men jumped into the fight. They helped Agent McDaniels, and they threw Agent Biggins into the ocean. The boys had no idea what was going on. Then Agent McDaniels pulled out his gun and pointed it at the boys. Oop! The boys put their hands up. They had no clue. Ed looked over, and he recognized the 2 men. They were the bank robbers. Ed said, I recognize you anywhere. That's Melvin, and that's the dopey bank robber. And the dopey bank robber went, huh? Ed and Lenny were so confused and they didn't know what to do. And Melvin said, I remember you, kid. And he started walking toward Ed like he was going to grab Ed and throw Ed into the ocean as well. But Agent McDaniel stopped him and said, stop. We need this kid to help us find the treasure. So the men grabbed the boys and threw them into the cabin and locked the door. The cabin was dark and quiet, except for the soft sound of the waves slapping against the side of the ship. Lenny was confused and said, Ed, I don't know what's going on. And Ed said, I do. Agent McDaniels has joined forces with Melvin and the dopey bank robber, probably for a share of the treasure. And they want us to help them find it. They threw Agent Biggins overboard because he was the only one who could get in their way. And now we're stuck on a ship, locked in a cabin, with 2 bank robbers and a dirty double-crossing FBI agent. Lenny said, what do we do? What do we do? And Ed said what he said whenever he didn't know what to do. He said, Lenny, all I know to do is pray. Let's pray. And Ed bowed his head, and Lenny said, pray to who? And Ed looked up and said, well, to God, of course. And Lenny said, how do you know God will hear you? How do you know God even cares? How do you know God even knows where we are? We're in the middle of the ocean, locked in a dark cabin of a ship. And Ed said, I'll tell you how I know. The Bible. You see, Lenny, the Bible is how I know who God is and what he's like, because the Bible is God revealing himself. Lenny said, reveal? What does that mean? Ed said, I'll show you. He felt along the side of the ship until he found the porthole. A porthole is a round window in a ship. It was dark, but Ed grabbed the curtains and he threw back the curtains, and the cabin filled with light. It revealed what was inside of the cabin, but it also revealed what was outside the cabin. Lenny looked out and he saw the beautiful blue sky. He saw the clouds. He saw the seagulls flying by. He saw the vast ocean. Then he looked in the cabin, filled with light, and he saw that there was a galley. That's the ship's kitchen. He saw that there was a berth. That's where sailors sleep. And cots, that's what they sleep on. He saw the head. That's what they call the bathroom. He saw paintings on the wall of Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. He saw a bowl of fruit on the table. Thankfully, now he knew they wouldn't starve locked there. Lenny looked around and it clicked. He got it. He understood. The Bible's like a light that shows us how to be saved and how we should live. The Bible is God revealing himself, showing himself to us. God could, if he wanted to, appear in the sky in a flash of light. God could, if he wanted to, speak down from heaven in a thunderous voice. But he chose to reveal himself through the Bible. And the Bible is like a light that shows us how to be saved and how to live, and so many people don't know how to live. Why am I here on earth? What's the purpose in life? What am I supposed to do? They have no clue and they have nobody to ask. But God gave us the answers in the Bible. And Lenny understood it. And Lenny said, Ed, do you have a Bible that I could read? And Ed walked over to his suitcase and he unzipped his suitcase and he got out his pocket Bible that his grandma Edna had given him years ago. It had been through so much with Ed. It had been through Ed's last time on Ishmael Island, soaked with salt water, covered in sand. It had been through Ed's mud pie baking contest when Ed fell face first into the mud, and so did his Bible. It had been through being dropped in dishwater. Ed was doing the dishes while trying to balance the Bible on his nose and still do the dishes so he could read the Bible and do the dishes at the same time, and it fell in the soapy water. It had been through a lot with Ed, but Ed knew Lenny needed a Bible. So he said, "Here, Lenny." And the way that Lenny took it, you would have thought it was like a newborn kitten. Carefully, gingerly he held it, and he brought it to his chest like a treasure. And he said, "Thank you, Ed." And he flipped through the pages and said, "Oh my goodness, there's a lot of pages. Where do I even start?" And Ed said, "I have an idea. Why don't you take the Psalm 119 challenge?" Lenny said, "What's the Psalm 119 challenge?" Ed said, "It's where you read the entire chapter of Psalm 119. And Lenny said, "That's easy. It's just a chapter." Ed said, "But it's the longest chapter in the entire Bible." Lenny said, "Okay, well, what's it about?" Ed said, "It's all about the Bible. Every verse in Psalm 119 is about the Bible." And all the Bible points to Jesus. He said, "It's not an ordinary chapter, though. It's a poem, an acrostic poem." And Lenny said, "What's a prognostic poem?" Ed said, "Not prognostic, Lenny, acrostic." Lenny said, "Yeah, that. What's that?" Ed said, "It's a poem with each line or each section beginning with the next letter of the alphabet. So in English, it would be A, B, C, D, E, F. This is a Hebrew poem. So it's Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, etc., etc." And Lenny said, "I've never heard an acrostic poem before." And Ed said, "You're in luck, because I always keep with me my acrostic poem about donuts." It's going to start with A and then go B and C. Listen carefully, Lenny. Any day I would eat a donut because they are delicious, chewy, delightful, and edible. Fools don't like donuts. Gee, I would like to eat one right now. How could you go one day without a donut? I have no idea. Just because, Lenny said, I get it. An acrostic poem is a poem where each line or section begins with the next letter of the alphabet. Ed said, that's right. Lenny said, sir, I accept your challenge. And Ed said, good, because A to Z, Psalm 119, is all about the Bible. He said, Lenny, can I show you a prayer before we read the Bible? Lenny said, sure. Ed read Psalm 119, verse 18. Open my eyes, that I may behold wondrous things out of your law. Together the boys bowed their head and prayed, God, please open our eyes that we could see the wondrous beauty of your word. Amen. They read Psalm 119, and then they joked around and played cards. They almost forgot that they were locked in a ship's cabin with 3 bad guys on board who wanted them to find the treasure and then probably were going to throw them overboard afterwards. Until they heard the keys jangling. The cabin door opened and in walked Melvin and Agent McDaniels. Melvin said, I've been waiting a long time for this, kid. I'll never forget what you did to me. What was your name again? Phil? Vladimir? Cheese Block? Lenny and Ed looked at each other and went. Agent McDaniel said, Ed. And Melvin said, oh yeah, at least I was close. Lenny said, not really. Melvin ran over and he grabbed Lenny and held him like this. And he looked right at Ed and he said, Ed, you're going to take us to Ishmael Island and we're going to find the treasure. And Ed said, are you serious? I washed up on the island in the middle of the night in a storm and I was unconscious. How do you expect me to find the island? And Melvin said, you better. And Ed said, well, what if I can't? He said, then your friend becomes shark bait. Ed got mad. And he said, drop him, Melvy Welvy. And he stomped on Melvin's foot. And Melvin dropped Lenny, who landed on Agent McDaniel's foot. So Melvin was hopping around on one foot. Agent McDaniels was hopping around on one foot. Lenny got down on his hands and knees, which didn't take very long because he was so short, and he bit Agent McDaniels in the other foot. So Agent McDaniels was hopping on this foot, then hopping on this foot, then hopping on this foot, then hopping on this foot. And then Ed took a fire extinguisher and he clubbed Melvin in the knee. So Melvin was hopping on this foot, and then hopping on this foot, and hopping on this foot, and hopping on this foot. And the boys ran up on the deck, and they passed the dopey bank robber who went, huh? But the boys had nowhere to run. Ed ran toward the bow or the front of the ship. Lenny ran toward the back or the stern of the ship. They jumped over cargo. They ducked under sails. Eventually they met in the middle. But the men surrounded them. And Ed didn't know what else to do, so he yelled, Lenny's a table! Lenny yelled back, Lenny's not a table. Ed hollered back, Lenny is a table. This goes back to their time in school. They were both bullied by the same kids. One was named Joseph, the other was named Chad. They were super mean to Lenny. One time they taped him to the flagpole, and he was stuck there all into the night until the janitor found him and cut him down. One time they took a permanent marker and they drew a mustache on Lenny's face. And he couldn't wash it off because it was permanent marker, so for 2 weeks he had a pink mustache. One time they put one of those puppet eyeballs that, when you shake it, squiggle around. They stuck one to his forehead. And he wasn't allowed to say any words that day except meat, 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 mork, 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 mork. One time they made him wear a pink tutu. And every time they passed him in the hall, they'd say, who's a pretty, pretty princess? And Lenny would have to twirl on his tippy toes and say, I'm a pretty, pretty princess. They were mean to him. And one time they were being mean to him. And so Ed got behind them on his hands and knees. And he said, Ed's a table. You see, he wanted Lenny to push the boys over Ed so they would trip and fall backwards over him and the boys would jump up and run away. Well, Ed said, Ed's a table. And Lenny said, he is? What kind? Mahogany? pool table, air hockey table, foosball table, dinner table, restaurant table, round table pizza. By that time, Chad and Joseph saw what they were doing and gave Ed a wedgie, and then gave Lenny a wedgie. The boys were laying on the ground in pain, and Ed said, "Next time, Lenny, you be the table." So here they were on a ship and surrounded by 3 bad guys, and Ed yelled, "Lenny's a table!" And Lenny said, "Lenny's not a table." And Ed yelled, "Lenny is a table!" And Lenny said, "Fine, Lenny's a table." And he got down on his hands and knees, but by this time it was too late. They argued so much the men figured out exactly what they were doing. So Agent McDaniels picked up Lenny by the collar like this and put him right in his face and laughed in his face. "Ha ha ha ha, you think I'll fall for that, kid?" Just then Ed yelled, "Hey, Agent McDoofus!" Agent McDaniels turned around and Ed smacked him in the face with a mackerel. A mackerel is a smelly, slimy bait fish. He didn't know it, but Agent McDaniels was afraid of raw fish. When it hit him in the face, he screamed like a 4-year-old girl. He dropped Lenny. He fell to his knees and he yelled, "The smell! It's polluting my very being. And the sliminess is melting my soul." The boys ran. Guys, there is a God, and he wants you to know him. That's why he gave us the Bible. It reveals God. It shows us who he is. But not just that, it reveals his plan. It's like a light that shows us how to be saved and how we should live. So many people go through life and they don't know how to do life, and they have so many questions, they don't know where to go for answers. That's why God gave us the Bible. It's the most important book in the whole world. Guys, Lenny and Ed are stuck on the ship with 3 bad guys. They're free for now, but they can't run around forever. They can't jump in the water or else they'd probably be lost at sea, which is worse than being on the ship. What are they going to do? How are they going to be rescued? Will they ever be rescued? Tune in next time for Hidden Treasures Part 3. Guys, thanks for joining me for Hidden Treasures Part 3. We're having so much fun, and I want to remind you of our epic questions. The first, what is the Bible? It's God revealing himself and his plan to his people. Second, how did we get the Bible? God guided human authors. Remember, we talked about the wind filling the sail, guiding the ship. God guided human authors. And finally, our third question, the question for today is, how does the Bible help us? Well, it's like a light that shows us how to be saved and how we should live. Guys, tune in next time for Hidden Treasures Part 3. I'll see you then. But for now, Mr. Forrest out.